This is Paul Johnson with the Optimistic American. And my guest today is very special. First, she's a mother of 10 children. She is a rabbi's wife, and she is an incredible, powerful force at Congregation Beth Tefillah, which is a synagogue in the Phoenix area. She's going to talk about her son, who's in the IDF. She's going to talk about a wide variety of issues going on in the Jewish community. But I think the thing you're going to like the best is how does somebody manage when they have 10 children? She really is the epitome of family values and has great psychological insight as to how it is that you can make certain that you raise great children. This is Paul Johnson. Now, if you like this subject and what it is that we're talking about, press that subscribe button and let's get this show going.
It's our humble honor to invite you to the show, Esther. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and imparting your wisdom, not just for us, but also, for all the guests and mothers and fathers and parents out there on Jewish values and family values and what it's like to be a mother of 10 children and what you've learned throughout your life and journey as a mother and parent, wife of Rabbi Allouche, who's also a tremendous figure in our community at Congregation Beth Tefillah. And I know personally, not just me, but also many family members look to you for wisdom and guidance, especially since October 7th has occurred, but also the strife and conflict and stressors and losses and grief and challenges that people experience in their life when they're really seeking some spiritual advice, something that they can really hold on to help them through a struggle or something that they're suffering through. So thank you so much for agreeing to be here. I'm excited about what we're going to learn today on our show.
Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's first start when we were talking about this podcast. You said, well, I'm an expert in motherhood. I'm an expert in family. And I said, well, perfect. Let's start there. What would you say, as a mother of 10 children, all varying in ages, we both have daughters the same age who are 3 years old, up into your oldest, who is
23.
23. Yeah, I was trying to count. And such a diverse family, everybody is so different. And I know just from being in your household, you really take such an individualistic approach in nurturing the neshama and the light and the spirit in each child. And you have such a unique perspective. So what would you say are some of the guiding values that you bring to your household and you would like to share?
Sure. So each of my children, I feel, is a diamond. And then every diamond is precious. Mm-hmm. And however heavy it might be and however hard it might be to raise that child, I know that he's precious to me. And so therefore, I'm going to do whatever I can for this child. But you ask me, how do I do it? So I always say, when people ask me that question, I always say, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one activity at a time. Yeah. So obviously I didn't have 10 children all at once. It all came gradual. And, my oldest is 23, who's, thank God, already married, expecting his first child.
Mazel tov.
Very excited about that. And then my youngest is 3. So they all vary in different ages, and each one, obviously, the younger kids have the older kids to be there for them and give them attention and take care of them as well. So it's not only me. But at the same time, I feel that when your children are small, they take a lot of you need to take care of their physical needs. And that's what really, you need to focus on, and that takes a lot of time. But as they get older, they become more independent, and then it's more the emotional support that you give your children. And so, for example, when my son, who's learning abroad in Melbourne, Australia, he's 19, and when he calls me, and it could be just once a week or twice a week that he would call me, and it's 5 minutes, I know that he has a break from his learning, that he could speak to me. I know that those 5 minutes, I have to give my all and I have to be there all the way for him. And for me, that has to be the most important part of my day. It's that 5-minute phone call, because I know that that's all I'm going to get with him, and I got to give it my all. And then obviously for my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old, then I have to help them with, with getting dressed and all the physical activities, making sure they eat nutritious food, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel that there's something that I learned in this in a parenting book that I've been reading for many, many years. It's one that I highly recommend. It's called The Blessing of a Skinned Knee. And in that book, she brings a lot of Jewish principles to parenting, and she explains how do we as parents relinquish control over our children, because we see sometimes parents, they instill in they have this fear, and then unfortunately they instill this fear in their kids of not knowing what's going to be, and they're like they're like what we call the helicopter parents, and every little thing they have to be on top of their kids. They have to be control over everything that happens in their lives, and they have to understand that over time, when they're small, they're really dependent on everything for us to change their diapers and feed them every 2 hours. But as they grow, then we need to step back and let them make their own decisions, even though they might make the wrong decisions, but they need to learn how to face different ups and downs in life, and different bumps on the road, so that they could become more resilient children. And we learned this from the concept of God. When God, it says, when he created the world, at first there was only God in the world, and in order to make space for his creations, it says that it's called the concept of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum in Hebrew means to contract. So God had to contract himself in order to make space for the creations, for us to be here. And so therefore, when you look out at the world, you don't see God, but he is present there. And so the same way with our children, slowly over time, as they grow and become more independent, we need to step back and put them on, let them make decisions on their own. And that has always been my husband's and I's motto with our kids, to let them do things on their own. And my kids are very independent.
Yes.
They know how to go into the kitchen and make themselves an omelet if they're hungry, or even go out and make a steak, in the barbecue, like different things. They asked me, could I go to Walgreens and go pick up a present for my friend's birthday? And it could be my 10-year-old. And I say, yeah, go grab the bike and go. Here, you have a limit. This is $15, $20. Go choose yourself a present for your friend. And so I'm not over worried about them.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great book called it's about the disappearing God in the Bible, how originally he was here constantly.
Right.
They could see him, they could talk to him, they could
Right.
communicate with him. But if you then follow the Bible over time, he increasingly becomes more invisible, and all of a sudden we're talking to him through a different means. That's fascinating to hear you apply that to parenthood. I've had to learn the hard way as a parent that you do have to let go. I have
Right.
I have a boy who's in his 40s, right? And it's and if you don't learn how to let go, it doesn't work for either one of you. It begins to fall apart. But what I want to know is, you had 10 children. I want to go back to kind of the beginning of how this works. With 10 children, she and I have now a 3-year-old.
3-year-old, yeah.
When we go to take that 3-year-old, out to eat, it takes us 30 to 40 minutes to get ready, to get her food in her little lunch bucket, to get her clothes inside of her backpack, to make certain that she has her stuff. She fights with us to not put her shoes on or to not put her pants on. Then we get to the car, we've got to kind of load her up. Then when you get to the location, you have to not only unload her, but make certain that you're not letting her go running out into the street. From the time that you started to where you are today, what did you learn in managing that process?
So I've learned to simplify things and to make my life easy in certain ways. Like, for example, I always keep a change of clothes in the car, so I don't have to worry about packing it every time. And then I always tell myself, especially for example now in the heat, always these two things I have to worry about, like the water bottle and are they wearing shoes? Because a lot of times I get somewhere and I open up the car to let them go, and I'm like, wait, you forgot your shoes. What are we gonna do? Oops, all right, you're gonna have to stand on the cart, sit in the cart the whole time while we're at Walmart or wherever. So
I've had
yeah.
them forget them when they got to school.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
that has happened to me many times.
Yeah.
So I have backups in the car sometimes, or I have a friend that lives close to the school because I live at least 20 minutes away. Or what I've done, I've learned, this. If I have to, I run to the store with them and we go buy them a new shoes if they anyway needed a new shoes. So yeah. You just have to deal with whatever it is that comes your way. But I feel the most important part is that we need to be patient. Patience is the key. We tend to rush our kids through all the routines and then and go, come on, and then we have to get there on time. But sometimes wait for them. You gotta be with them, hear them out. Sometimes they need to express themselves, and a whole tantrum could come out of just not listening to them. And it could be the most simplest thing that they want you to hear them out, and that's it. And if you would hear them out, it would prevent that whole tantrum.
We were just having that conversation exactly. Somebody in Paul's family said, I think in kind of a curious way, but I have been criticized, you don't discipline your daughter. And I said, well, what exactly should I be disciplining her for? What is she doing? And they said, well, you're going to raise her to be entitled. And I said, well, let me think back to an example when she was having a tantrum. And there was a time she was sitting with Paula and I in the living room, and she wanted to watch something in particular. And she was describing the show to us. But we had no idea. It sounded like she was making up these words. They were made up words. And so we thought, well, let's just put something else on and hope we can.
Saying long beard and hat and glasses, and we're like,
it was Harry Potter.
Oh, really?
She saw Harry Potter and she wanted to see the show Harry Potter. She loves the magic and the things in Harry Potter, and we were just trying to transfer her attention to something else, because that's something I've often learned as parenting. Like if she's upset, just get her to fixate on something else and she'll just move through it.
Right. Which that works sometimes, but not always.
Not always.
Depends how stubborn.
She was very stubborn and really wanted to express and explain so that we would understand. And Paul and I both stopped what we were doing. It probably took us about 10 minutes to figure out what she was really asking. And when that happened, she was relieved. We were all relieved. But that was the main thing. She wanted to be understood, and she was communicating and conveying something important. And if we were going to dismiss her, then that's just going to perpetuate the tantrum, and then we're going to enter into a power struggle. And I find that that's so much what the authoritarian type parenting style is about. It's really about the power and control. And people think, well, if you acquiesce and you give the child the power and control, then they're running the show. And I said, well, it's a beautiful thing. Let her feel like she has that power, and she's negotiating with us what she wants. And I find myself, okay, you have 5 more minutes to do this, and we'll work together as a team, rather than me overpowering her to get her to do what I want on my terms and my time.
That's right.
And it's a different philosophy. It's a completely different approach. It doesn't work for every person, but it is working for us. And I feel like it really is nurturing her personality. She's very cooperative. She's also very independent. She's very caring and very nurturing to younger children. I don't see what a lot of people are really overly concerned about, her being entitled or getting her way all the time. I think she understands the boundaries because we place them there.
Exactly.
Paul's probably better at placing the boundaries.
Well, I think it makes sense. I mean, personally, I think it makes sense that you're very sparing on any type of discipline with a 3-year-old, right? That to me makes sense. I also believe when they move into those teenage years, that can become more challenging.
Right.
The consequences become much bigger for the choices that they're making.
Yes.
So how did you deal with that
Right.
mean,
So
you've been
first of
through
all,
every stage.
exactly. So first of all, early on, my husband and I told ourselves, if we can say yes, why say no? A lot of times we always want to say no, 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 but wait one second, think a little bit. Is it really a difference? Like, is it okay to say yes in this situation if the child wants the window open or wants to eat this instead of that? So certain times it's okay to say yes and not say no. So but obviously, as long as those borders are really clear, when it's no, it's no. But within that framework that you're putting for your kids, a lot of times we're saying no when we could say yes. So that's the first thing, and then as they grow and they become teenagers, the relationship changes, and then we have to be very careful, because these teenage years, especially the preteens, is when they're forming their identity, and we have to let them form that identity in a healthy way. Without overpowering them and strangling them, as we parents sometimes like to do. And so I feel that it shifts a little bit, and the disciplining that if you were very strict with them when you were supposed to be strict with them, as they get older, you won't need to be so strict anymore. And at that period of time, what they really need is the love, the unconditional love, that you support them, that you're there for them, that you have a listening ear, and make sure to always take time to have one-on-ones with them when the rest of the children are out of earshot, and you could just take them out, go for a walk, a bike ride, take them for coffee, go to the mall with them, one-on-one, if possible, so that they feel that you really want them and want to be with them. And so I feel it's more about the love.
Yeah, you're taking an interest in them, that you
Exactly.
accept them,
And
you're
that you
not being
accept them.
judgmental of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of times parents have like a vision of what they want their kids to be. Like, I want you to one day be a doctor or a lawyer or, or get the best grade, get into the best college. But sometimes that child is more like an artistic and more carefree spirit, child, and it's not for them. And no matter how much you're gonna scream at them and go behind them to get good grades and to do well academically, they might not be the best thing for them. So we always make a thing, like when it comes to report cards, we don't drill our kids with the report cards. Like, for us, the grade is not what's important. When I go to a parent-teacher meeting, what I want to know is how is he in relation to the other kids? How is he as a person? Because really, that's what's going to count the rest of his life. If he has the right, the character that that I would want in a person, and then the learning, the academics, if they really want it, they're going to pursue it on their own. Knowledge is everywhere now. It's so easy for them to learn anything, and if they missed out on a certain grade in school and a certain subject, they could always make it up if they need it. If they failed math in 8th grade, it's okay, they can make it up. Like, we don't make a big deal out of their grades they make in school, to the better or the worse. Yes. I don't know, maybe we're not doing the right thing, but in our we feel that we want the child to be whole and balanced and healthy all around. And that's just one little aspect. So we do tell them to get good grades, and we do encourage them to study, but obviously they understand that we're both so busy, and I can't keep track of who's having a test and a quiz when, and who has to review their spelling test, and who has to. So I just let them learn their own consequences. And if they don't come to me and ask me specifically, Mommy, can you help me with this specific test, which I do have some of my kids who are very studious, and they on their own come to me or my husband, and we take the time to study with them and give them extra attention, and help them with whatever they need. But if they're not coming to me and asking me, it's their consequence. They're going to receive whatever consequence the school provides for them if they don't do what they need to do.
So the one thing that's obvious with every one of your children at the synagogue is they are extremely polite and kind to other people, and they watch out after one another.
Yes, they do.
I've noticed that. So how did you instill those values?
So I guess by example. Like, I didn't tell them to do that. They just saw me in my natural way of being. I do that for others all the time. So I guess they learned it by example.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that I've noticed, you and the rabbi the rabbi does a wonderful job, and I love Rabbi Allouche, but you're a power all unto yourself. I mean, you're amazing to watch with the amount of time and effort and energy you put not only into the synagogue, but that you put into other people in the congregation. You're helping of them, you're working with them. How do you balance that? How do you balance that with your family, the conflicts that come from listening to everyone else's problems and everyone else's challenges, and they're all coming to you for help, and at the same time, you're trying to raise your own children and your own family. How do you make that balance work?
Right. So great question. So first of all, like anybody in the congregation, everybody that I meet, like I consider them my good friends. Like you're my good friend. Like I consider you like you're my sister. And so I think that already puts down all those obstacles that we can put in our heads. Why do I need to listen to her? But if you're my sister, then I want to listen to you. I want to make time for you because it's important for me. So we believe that we're all brothers and sisters. And so that's what I try to do in like when I come to the synagogue. I'm always warm. I'm always give a hug. I always want to listen and do what I can because I know that you're my family. And that's the way I look at all the people in my community, or at least I try to. At least that's what I strive to do. And now, we all wear different hats. And we as women, even more, we have all these different hats that we wear. And so, but I try to make my hats different priorities. So I have the number 1 hat, the number 2 hat, the number 3 hat. And it starts obviously being my wife. First, I'm a wife. So if my husband calls me and he needs me for something, and I drop everything and I'm there for him. So that's my number 1. Like I'm his biggest cheerleader. And that comes even before being a mother to my kids. My kids have to see that my relationship with my husband, it has to be
strong,
unified, and I'm always there for him. So that's my number 1 hat. My number 2 hat is I'm a mother. And obviously if it's between if my kids right now this second they need me, so I'm with them. So like for example, if I have any shul meetings that I have to plan for, any classes that I have to give, I'm always very careful to do it during the day when they're in school, and it doesn't interfere with them. Like if somebody asks me, could we have an appointment, or could we meet at 5:30 in the afternoon, I'm like, oops, nope, sorry, I can't do that. So it's either after I finish with my kids and I put them to bed, or during the day when they're in school. Like I'm very careful that when the kids come back from school, I try as much as I could to be with them and to be present with them and listen to them, help them, obviously, feed them dinner, take them to their after school activities, and put them to bed and get them ready for bed. But yeah, so that's mostly, and then the hats continue, then I have my relationship with the synagogue and with the community. And then I'm also planning events. I host a book club once a month. I give classes. I have a group of ladies that are converting to Judaism, and I help them once a week, and I take care of them. My husband does a lot of weddings, and he officiates in weddings, and so I learn with the brides. So I do lots of bride classes. I'm actually in the middle of teaching 3 different brides in town and out of town. We do Zoom, and then I also plan lots of ladies activities. Remember the time way back when you did the belly dancing for us, and you gave us a course on that. That was really fun.
And fertility, we were learning about the history of the fertility of the belly dancing and where it comes from. And I remember you provided a sacred text to help with fertility. Yes. And I actually reviewed that prior to us getting together. So I had all my forces working.
All right, so before I get embarrassed, I want to ask some questions that I don't completely understand. So to begin with, my family is Jewish. Emily's Jewish, our little girl's Jewish, her parents are Jewish. I'm not Jewish, right? But I've never been more welcomed into an institution than the synagogue. It is a beautiful thing to watch. And as I've said to you, I've never learned as much about standing than I've learned from Rabbi Allouche. He's an amazing human being to listen to. But I also learn a lot from you. I mean, you're pretty amazing in your own right on this. But help me understand this. I'd like to. The synagogue is an Orthodox synagogue. There are some customs that I'm not really used to. My family's Irish and Swedish. As I said, we hug everybody. All right, we just hug everybody. It's what we do. But you've talked about why it is that you don't hug. You're one of those people that I always want to go up and hug every time I see you. You have this big bright smile, you have these eyes that are glistening, but then I know that the rule is that I'm not supposed to. Help me understand the rule. Why does that rule exist?
Great question. So Judaism tries to preserve this idea of human touch. And so unfortunately, we've been desensitized by society and by the norms in society, with anything connected with physical touch, that we're not sensitive to it anymore as we used to in eras bygone. And so this relationship between a husband and a wife, between a man and a woman, is very sacred to us. It's compared to the holiest of holies in the temple in Jerusalem. This union that happens every time a husband and a wife are intimate. And so this is very sacred, and we want to preserve that, and we want that to be the most special relationship you have. And so if you allow yourself to hug and kiss and be physically close to any guy that you meet, then they will take away from that relationship. And so when you tell yourself, when you put boundaries around your who you have physical contact with, then you're able to make that relationship with your husband the most precious ever. And so that's why we don't, unless it's a family member, like a parent, a brother, a sister, grandparents, your children, of course.
And when it comes to children, you're allowed to hug children until they turn 13.
No, but not us. I mean, not the parent. I could hug my grown-up son anytime. For the rest of his life, I can hug because he's my son. But when they turn 12 or 13, the bat mitzvah age, that's when they cannot hug or, come in contact with people of the opposite sex.
All right, explain to me the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah. What's the importance of that? What's the role that plays in both the religious structure as well as the personal life?
Yeah, that's beautiful. So we all possess two souls. We have our animalistic soul, which is that physical drive to fulfill all our physical needs, like sleep, eat, drink, physical pleasures. And then we all have as well a godly soul. And this godly soul is the one that perpetuates inside of it. It's that fire that we have inside us to find more meaning in our lives and to connect to more spiritual things in our lives. And so when we're born, we're just born with the animalistic soul and with this physical soul, and that's why children are very egocentric, and they're always and they're only worried about their physical needs. But then as they become closer to this 12 or 13 age, they start realizing that they have a godly force within them, and that's when they receive this more spiritual soul, and it's the godly soul. And so therefore in Judaism we abide by this passage of time, and we let them know that now you're a responsible Jew, a responsible part of society.
You have an obligation to something bigger.
Exactly, and you have an obligation to something. Now you're old enough because now you received your second soul. And so till now it has all been practice, but from now on you need to take upon yourself more than you did beforehand. And so as parents, in spiritual terms, we relinquish more power from them, and we give them more responsibility. Now it's up to you to wake up in the morning and, as a boy, put on tefillin, or take out your prayer book and pray. I'm not going to come behind you and tell you, don't forget to pray. You need to do this on your own. And so we leave it up to them. And obviously we live by example, And we hope that they will do it on their own. And I've had children who become so religious, much more practicing than I would ever imagine. I've had other ones who, they've left it on the side, but then here and there, I hear feedback that they've helped a friend with a religious practice, or they took upon themselves to do this class, and they did it on their own. So that's the thing. We try very, very hard not to not to force our kids into anything, especially as when they pass this what's it called? This transition, exactly. This transitional age of 12 and 13.
Yeah, and 12 for girls and 13 for boys.
Exactly.
Why 12 for girls and 13 for boys?
Because girls are just more mature.
I've been hearing that for a long time.
Exactly.
I'm 63 and they still seem to be more mature than me. But
I think it's so apparent, your optimism. And that was something that I saw that you had written about, and that you make a conscious effort not to go into that space in your mind where you're overly critical or upset or have these grievances or resentments about, and that is a conscious choice that you're making. Maybe speak to that. How do you stay so optimistic?
Yeah, I love that. So I've been taught early on in this Jewish motto, which has become my life motto, and is to always look at the cup half full and not half empty. Always serve God, as we say, we're serving. We're not here in this world to fulfill our needs. We're here to serve others. And when you think of yourself as a servant of God, and then you put that joy into everything that you do, and that positivity. And always, I feel that it's something that we're missing in our world and in society, which is that trust. We forget to trust in the one who created us, and that trust in Hebrew is called bitachon. Or emunah, that trust in God is so important. And when you know that God is in control and He's taking care of you, and you're doing everything you can in your physical power, and that's it. Once I know I've done everything I could, then that's it. Then I let go. Like if He's going on the plane and He's going off to the other side of the world, and my son, or when my husband, that's it. I let go, and I said, God, you're going to protect him, right? And I do not worry. That's the thing. I tell myself that it's in God's hands. And I put that worry on God. God, you worry for me, not me. I deal whatever I can do. And if I can do it, then I do it.
All right, so you have a son who is in the IDF. He was one of the first over after October the 6th.
October 7th.
October 7th.
The IDF is the Israeli Defense Force.
Right, and he was put on the front line, and he went through some hard things, including one of his better friends next to him losing his life. Are you still able to apply that during that period of time when you're going through all of that with your oldest son?
Excellent question. Yeah, since October 7th, it's been like one of my hardest years as a mother. Yes, it's been extremely challenging, and it's been really, really hard. And I've cried, and I've at the beginning I couldn't even get out of bed. It was so hard to imagine what my son is going through, and that anything could happen at any given moment. And so I've learned that I have to pray, and I have to continue living and continue to be there for the rest of my children. And so thank God, I'm always busy. So at least because I keep myself always so busy, it doesn't give me time to think about these scenarios of what could happen, what if. So, but at the same time, I apply this idea of bitachon, of trust in God, especially with my son. And I have to tell myself, this is a privilege. This is my honor to have my son there in the front lines in this war of good versus evil. And so what he is doing for the Jewish nation and for the world, as a whole is incredible. And I just have to be a proud mama, and that's it. And not worry about what if. And so that's what I just try to tell myself. And yes, there are times that I can't even breathe. It's so hard. Like I feel that my throat is closing in on me, and I can't, and I feel that like there's nothing I can do. And so that's when I do either one of two things. I turn on the music really loud and just sing along, because that really helps me release the tension and just helps me, just let it all go. Or I open up my book of Psalms and I just say Tehillim and I pray.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's when I went to Israel with your husband, with Rabbi Allouche, we got to the place where the concert was held, and the young where Hamas murdered a number of 300 young men and women there, and there were troops stationed in different locations. They were sitting down, waiting to either be deployed or coming back in. And your husband went around to each one of the groups, and he was kind of studying the faces. I took a picture of it. It was one of those moments that I got choked up, because I knew he was looking for a son, or for people that he knew his son. It's it's an incredible sacrifice,
Yes.
For your family and for him. But he's someone that I think we can all be proud of. How do one of the things that I've seen, the Jewish community to me is it's more than just about the insular Jewish community. It's more than about just the people who are at the synagogue. It's not lost on me that the Jewish community, almost wherever they went, they ended up finding success. They were able to find success, I believe, because they hung to core values. You're talking about the bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah, and the idea that you're thinking about how do you have a multi-generational obligation to something greater than yourself. They're all literate. They've been literate for thousands of years, one of the most literate societies on the planet. The stories that they read are about sacrifice and giving and spending long periods of time to build something better. And the one thing that has been clear to me is you just don't see victims in the Jewish community. You see survivors in the Jewish community. And to me, Israel is about something more than just Israel. I think about Belgium and the United Nations. Belgium's not a cause. Belgium's a country. The United States and Israel, we are a cause. And I believe that we're a cause for something good, that we're about something good. We're about this light to the rest of the world, that people actually can govern themselves, and that we can live moral lives, and that we can enrich ourselves while we're here if we follow a set of principles and processes, and we can help our children and the next generation. But that's still a lot to say, I'm willing to allow my son or my daughter become a part of that and potentially suffer the ultimate consequence. The first, thank you to you and your family. But the second thing that I guess I would say is, then we have to watch here in the United States, as well as other places in the world, people who are critical of those efforts. And people should have the right always to speak up. But there's a complete misunderstanding, bad facts. Their history's messed up.
Yes.
They have no understanding of what they're talking about. And sometimes that's so challenging to me. And my daughter's here at home safe. How do you deal with that?
Good question. So, thank you. Like, how do I deal with anti-Semitism in the world, you mean? So I try not, like, I feel that there is no point in dealing with it. Like, meaning, like, I don't argue with these people. I just live my life, and my life is to bring light into the world, to do more actions of goodness and kindness. And I feel when I do that, automatically I fight the darkness, because I feel no matter how much I'm going to try to explain to them the facts, they don't want to listen. They're totally blocked. And so it's not going to get me anywhere if I try to do that. And so, for example, when I am driving by the Palestinian demonstrations here in Phoenix, so what I've taught my kids to do is not to make faces, not to make anything negative. What we do is we just put on really, really high, like a nice Jewish song, and we just seem very happy and we're very joyous. If we have an Israeli flag, we can take out the Israeli flag, but we're just joy, and we just want to bring light to
That's
the people
beautiful.
around us, and I feel that's all I can do.
Yeah, and gosh, that is such a metaphor for life. It's so easy to get caught up in other people's hatred and anger and misery, and to allow yourself to become part of that same mix. You have to rise above it, and sometimes rise above it just means being a light.
And to be intimidated and fearful and paranoid and allow that fear to infiltrate your life, like on an hour by hour basis. That's something I see. I'm a psychologist. I do clinical work. I do forensic work, and I see the after effects of that. And in many times it is legitimate. I mean, people have been genuinely victimized. They have a right to feel oppressed by this victimhood. But yet, as Paul was speaking about in the Jewish community, it just seems that there isn't this response that is more hateful, that is coming out or rising out as a result of what is being experienced. And I'm just wondering, what would you say to the haters of Jews? People are even challenging the question, what does anti-Semitism even mean? And is it anti-Semitic if you're challenging the politics of Israel?
You're anti-Zionist.
You're anti-Zionist, and what does it even mean to be anti-Semitic? And I think, well, people who hate Jews because they're Jewish, that's anti-Semitism to me. I mean, just keep it very simplified. And what would you say to the people who hate Jews today? What would be your message to them?
Just to go learn the facts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
you have distorted information or distorted reality.
So if you just the word that you use, anti-Zionism.
Yeah.
So if you want to go read the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, there's this book that was written that Adolf Hitler studied that said, hey, Zionists are this evil cabal of people who are trying to control all the world and all the gold, and they've got this hierarchy set up with the Rothschilds and all these other people, and this is how they're doing it. Now, almost every single fact in it was disputed. Well, what does Zionism really mean? Zionism really is a simple term that says, hey, we believe Jews should have a homeland.
That's it.
Right? That's all it means, right? And so if you're anti-Zionist, that means you don't believe Jews should have a homeland. You believe that that's something that they shouldn't be able to have. Well, why did we agree to give them a homeland? Forget about whether it was in Israel or not. Why did we agree to it? Because after the pogroms, the Russian pogroms, after what happened with Adolf Hitler, after what happened where they were persecuted around the world, and oh, by the way, when the World War was over, they went to go back home, and the places that weren't Nazi nations that had been occupied, they didn't want to let them back in, because that meant they wanted back their home that somebody else had already moved into. So to deal with that, the answer became, okay, you need to have a homeland. Now, this is my personal opinion. The United States is one of their homelands. This is the promised land to many Jews. Why? Well, because for many years, literally since the very beginning of George Washington greeted the first 5 families of Jewish people coming into the United States. This has been a place where many Jews have decided to live. But what we know is that right after World War II, we stopped letting them in. We started saying, no, can't come here. We're not looking for that group of immigrants. We had to do something, right? And giving them a promised land, that's Zionism. So if you oppose Zionism, you are being anti-Semitic. It, by its very nature, is anti-Semitic. Are we going to convince Hamas of that? Not a chance. When you read the covenants written in 1988, they talk about how you should kill every Jew behind every bush. How are you going to change that mind on Zionism? Now, here's the downside. They're organizing in the United States. They're organizing, they have groups, they have money, and those groups and organizations are promoting a very set of anti-Semitic thoughts. I think we've gotten to the point in the United States where we thought we didn't have to fight that anymore. The answer is, you always have to fight it. But the way to fight it isn't with a stick, it isn't with a gun, It isn't with yelling out your car door at them. It's through education, through speaking up. It's through being the light.
Right.
It's through being something better. Again, I think the Jewish community has been incredibly successful over history because they've continued to follow those principles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Beautiful.
saying and showing you misunderstand me. I think that was
Right.
something that you had written about before that I thought was
Right.
really beautiful. Rather than me criticizing them or getting mad and angry at them, no, like let me be nice to them. Let me be
Right.
kind to people who misunderstand me,
That's right.
rather than respond with hate. And I think that's really beautiful. With the rise of what was happening on college campuses and the anti-Semitism and the protest that was happening on campuses, what were you telling your children? How were you like putting this, and obviously like developmentally appropriate ages, because you have such a vast range of children's ages. How were you explaining this and informing them about what was going on?
Right, very good question. So, when I was growing up, I grew up with all the stories of the Holocaust. My grandmother was a Holocaust survivor.
You came from Venezuela, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. But my grandmother, she's from Ukraine, and she survived this concentration camps together with her mom and her sister. And so I grew up reading all the books, including Anne Frank and all the other millions of Holocaust book stories that you can find in the library. And as well as I grew up learning about all the stories of resilience of the Jews in Russia and how they survived the communism, and how all the self-sacrifice that the Jews had to have all the underground educational schools that they would have, because they weren't allowed to practice, to have a bris, to have bar mitzvahs and Jewish weddings, and to continue learning our Torah, our values. And so I grew up with all these stories my whole life, and I always knew that now we live in a different era, and now we could practice our Judaism freely, and we never have to hide that we are Jews. And so when this happened, when October 7th happened, and all of a sudden, like, we kind of like have to be a little bit careful, because now, like, I'm more conscientious when I'm walking around with my son who's wearing his kippah and his tzitzis. I mean, I've always told him that you have to, people are looking at you as a Jewish boy, and so you give a good impression always, and you have to be, you have to watch how you're behaving, because they're not going to look at you as any as any boy. They're going to look at you as a Jewish boy, and they could make, assumptions as these are the way that the Jewish kids behave. And so I always would make sure to tell that to my kids. So now, with all this anti-Semitism happening, I feel that I just tell them that the same way the Jews were resilient then, in Russia and in the Holocaust, the same way we're gonna be resilient too. And the main thing is not to show any fear. Like, my favorite song growing up as a little girl in Venezuela was I am a Jew and I'm proud. Soy judía con orgullo y lo gritaré. I will sing it out loud, and I will be very proudly here. I'm wearing my Magen David, and my kids know that as well. And we're very open about it. And then that's what I tell them, that we have a mezuzah in our door, and we're always protected, and we never have to worry about alarm systems and locking all the doors. Nothing is going to happen to us, because God is protecting us.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I remember, after October 7th, there was even members in the community that were expressing their fear of walking, on Shabbat to the synagogue, being identified in public as Jewish, wanting to conceal their Jewish identity, on the other hand of what you just expressed. And I thought it was beautiful, because you had said, no, this will protect you. It's the opposite of what you're thinking.
That's
Rather
right.
than hiding and concealing your Jewish identity, lead with it.
That's right.
And I think it's such a beautiful and such a valuable philosophy for life. And I was actually thinking, as you were speaking, I wonder what she thinks about society. Like, how does she think that society has changed, and where it's gone wrong, and what it's missing, and what it's lacking? And you had talked about the desensitization to touch, and that is losing the sacredness of touch. But what else are you seeing in society that has been changing or losing?
Or how can we do better?
Yeah, how can we improve? Yeah.
Right. So in Judaism, the idea of marriage, I feel, is a very important principle, and and everything that everything in Judaism leads back to this idea that a man and a woman need to have a holy union, and that holy union is a partnership that you have not just between the husband and the wife, but also with God. And so under the chuppah, when they have a chuppah and they have their ketubah, which is their official matrimony, the paper, the scroll, it
Dating back from the time of Nebuchadnezzar, I
That's
was researching
right.
about the
Yes.
ketubah.
the ketubah, and it's the same one since back then. And so that is not just like a certificate or like when somebody becomes an American
Legal.
citizen. Exactly. It's not like when you become an American citizen and then that's it. Now you have legal status and now you have this certificate that you are American. But it's something more spiritual. And it's this partnership that you have with God. And so therefore, it's not good enough just to live together. It's even more important to have that holy, that holy encapsule, like so that you're not just two people on your own, but you have God at your side. And then when you have God at your side, then you have the infinite, because we're finite people, and because we're so finite, it's hard for us. A man and a woman are very different. It's very hard for two people to live together and to learn how to, compromise and to get along and to, live a fulfilling life. And so when you know that you have God in the relationship and you're bringing that holiness into your practical marriage, then that adds it raises it above the norm, and it makes it, and it gives it an infinite power. And that infinite power allows it for it to work and allows it for that marriage to succeed. And so I feel marriage is something that's a very specific component, is a very essential to society. Mm-hmm. And when marriages fall apart and they're not given that importance, then society falls apart. Because broken marriages, unfortunately, breed kids that have issues. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure as a psychologist, you see these kids that have gone through these horrible divorces of people just not, fighting for all these stupid little things, and they can't be normal human beings. Okay, if you don't get along, if for whatever reason your marriage doesn't work out, that's okay. Torah allows you to get divorced, but behave like a human being, act to each other with decency, and if for yourself you can't get along for your children. So I always tell couples that are through the process of divorce or are getting divorced that have children, make sure to sit together and have meals together, have holidays together, do things together, not for yourself but for your children. Always in front of your children, act the best in the best of terms, and no cursing at each other, no calling names or being inappropriate, because what type of example you're giving your children? And so these kids are, they grow up with these scars, and they stay with them for the rest of their lives. And so that's why I feel that this is such an important.
You give advice to a lot of women who are getting married, take them through class.
Yes.
I'd love to hear your advice to men who are getting married, and what's important to the husband in a marriage. How should they respond correctly? What are the things that are important for them to do?
Yes. Okay. So the first thing is, this relationship has to be on a pedestal. Your wife has to be your most important relationship. And so the same way when, at work with your employee or your employer, you behave in the best, with the best manners, and you speak to them in the nicest way. The same way you have to be with your wife. You think, you live with each other, you could be yourself, and then you could be this despicable person with her, and with everybody else you're so kind and nice. And so the first thing is, make this relationship your most important relationship and never let that go. Number 2 is spend quality time together and enjoy, fun things together so that you could bond. And number 3 is, yes, have sex. It's a great part of marriage, and I encourage every couple to be intimate with each other. And we did discuss earlier about the laws of Jewish marriage, and how there are times within the month that a husband and a wife are allowed to be together, and there are times that they're not allowed to be physically together. And this enhances the passion and that desire within the couple. And
your point on that was that is the period of time to be more friends.
That's right.
To make certain that you build the friendship of the marriage. I thought that was a beautiful way to put that.
That's right. That's right. So,
and that's easy to forget.
Yes.
It's so easy to forget that you have so many things to do, and taking care of children, and taking care of their future, and taking care of their education, and making certain that you're building a household and everything else. But you need to have a friendship.
You need to have a friendship with each other, and you need to take quality time together. And I know my husband and I, we make it a point once a week to go for a walk together.
Even with 10 kids.
Even with 10 kids, and no kids are allowed to join us. And we make a point at least once a week to go out for coffee, go out for lunch, and every once in a while to do either a staycation solo or, go out of town together.
Rabbi Allouche has a romantic side.
Oh, yes, he sure does.
You're never going to see him the same.
Yes.
He does have 10 children.
You're right. What was I thinking?
Yes, no, for sure. That's vital. But I feel that when you if with your perspective in your intimate life is that bedroom is the holiest of holiest, and that you put it on that pedestal and you make it something so important, then that will have a ripple effect the rest of the home. Because if the husband and the wife, if the mother and the father are happy intimately, then their kids are going to be happy. The whole energy in the home is going to be happier. And so I feel like when there's tension between the spouses, then the kids feel that tension.
Yeah.
And so it's very, very important for the husband and the wife to be happy in the
we
bedroom.
had our little girl. She's only 3, and Emily, she's interesting. It's hard for me to know when Emily's upset or angry. She doesn't. Her voice never gets loud. She doesn't chastise you. Maybe she starts asking you more questions than she normally.
You're so amazing, Emily.
But
I have
one
my
of these
ways.
days
They may be subtle,
she's
but they're
asking me
there.
questions. I'm in bed, and Adina, who's only 3 years old, again, Emily was working very hard not to do anything that would have been evident that she was upset. But when she laid down, she said, "Mommy, put your arm on me." So her mom put her arm on her, and then she said, "Daddy, give me your arm." She put my arm on top of hers.
She was the master negotiator.
And then she said, "Mommy,"
Peacemaker.
she said, "Daddy's not a bad guy. He's a good guy. He's just silly."
Yes.
And I was
She's
like,
already reframing. She's
Really?
standing up for him at 3 years old.
But to
She
your
felt
point,
Yeah, she felt it.
felt it immediately.
Absolutely.
And it's
They sense
amazing how
It's
fast
amazing.
children pick up on
Yes,
that.
they're so sensitive to
Mhm.
it. Yes, very important. So so whenever I feel that there's an argument going on, or I feel that my husband's upset at me, or something is going on, right away I said I have to nip it in the bud. In private, I go to him. Could we have a moment together? Let's see what's going on. What are you upset about? What did I do wrong? Let's discuss this. Let's get this over with and not let it linger on, because then it just.
Do you have to let him know sometimes when he's done things wrong?
Yes.
How do you do that?
I know. Good question. So in a very, very matter-of-fact way,
Uh-huh.
and without any feelings. And it has to be short and to the point. They hate hearing you drill and going on and on and on and on.
Oh,
You
boy.
just, exactly. When you come
Pay
with,
attention.
She is the master. What have you been?
yeah, it's too bad we don't have him hearing this side of the story.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so I try to be to the point and just tell it to him once, and just let him know, that whatever it is that he did or he made me feel or wasn't right.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then he accepts it,
Mhm.
and we move on.
Yeah.
And so all this takes place. It's easier for it to take place before a woman goes to the mikvah. So it says that from the time that she gets her period for those, let's say, 4 or 5 days that she's menstruating. Then she starts counting 7 days, and these 7 days are the days that she's looking forward to, that time that she could go back to being with her husband. So from that time until she immerses in the mikvah, which is around 5 and 7, so 12 days, then she's not allowed, or they're not allowed to have any physical intimacy. And then when she comes back from the ritual waters of the mikvah and she immerses in them, then she comes back home and she's able to be physically with her husband. So during this 12-day period, that's the time to discuss any issues that have come up in the marriage, any challenges, so that you don't harbor all these feelings and you don't keep this baggage that sometimes I hear, a friend tells me or a woman tells me, oh, I remember that time when I was going out with my husband 25 years ago, or that time that he forgot to do this for me, or he was late, and like, what do you mean? That was 10 years ago. Why are you still thinking about it? It has to be gone. We all make mistakes. We're human beings. We're all working on our relationship, and you just have to let go of all those little things. And so when you immerse in the water signifies this renewal, because water is life. Water gives life to the world. And so when you go into the water, you shed all those negativities, all those things that could be obstructing within your marriage, and not only within your marriage, within yourself. And you're just letting go. And obviously it's a perfect time for us women to have a special time with God. I always say it's like the collect call. Remember when you were in camp and you had to do the collect call to your parents way back then, and you have like that 5, not even like a minute to say it all. So we have that collect call with God when we immerse in the water and we have this special time with Him. And so that special connection is a special time for prayer. And so it's like just a beautiful ritual that we Jewish women have.
So I have another question. So I wanted to piggyback on that concept of doing that internal work. And what I'm also hearing is this forgiveness.
Yes.
And Paul and I often talk about this. Like
Pre-forgiveness.
Pre-forgiveness. Like we're going to give each other pre-forgiveness because we can't necessarily anticipate what I might do that's going to hurt you or offend you.
She's sure when I go into the synagogue, I might ask the wrong question, as I might have here today. But she gives me pre-forgiveness before I go in, and I try to give her pre-forgiveness
and vice
also.
versa. Yes. And then we talk about it afterwards, and we process it, and we learn more about each other through that process.
Right.
But I think that it's the acceptance, it's having certain expectations from your spouse, but that they're also human and that you're learning and growing. He's going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. But we're going to preserve the relationship at all costs.
At all costs, because that's what you say by the chuppah. The verse that the husband tells the wife, it says, "Harei at mekudeshet li." Behold, you are holy unto me. So holy means that you are sacred. That it's the opposite of mundane. Mundane means that it's something, that common, something that you could, be with anybody, any woman out there. I can go out with. But once you take that pledge and that vow of marriage, then you tell your spouse, that's it. All those women out there, all those dates that would have worked, they are gone. They're insignificant to me anymore. Now the only one that matters is you. And when you have that relationship that it's only you that matters, and then you're going to do things that only you are going to know about, that are going to stay private and they're going to stay in the bedroom, then you're able to preserve that unity and that relationship and make it so special.
All right, so I'm going to do the last question here, unless you have another.
Well, there was something else I wanted to just share and unpack. Paul and I were recently talking about this, and I said, there's a lot of external forces that could challenge the health and well-being and the vitality of a marriage and a union and a relationship. And I think, not just from being a woman and being in myself, but also the work that I've done, sometimes the greatest threat to the relationship is right here. It's in our own mind. And it's going through the what ifs, and he did this, and that spite and that resentment and the bitterness and the things that builds upon. And it may have less to do with him and more about baggage I brought into the relationship. And so much of it I think the health of the internal work is not just about, well, let me just change him to suit my needs, because we often hear that. It's about, well, I need to be accountable for myself. I need to be accountable for my own health and mental well-being, spiritual well-being, for the health and longevity of the relationship. If I'm not the best version, or striving to be the best version of myself, because maybe it's unattainable, I think so, then how can I demand that from him to be
100%.
the best version of himself for me, or striving to be the best version of himself for me? And maybe that is the ideal.
Yes, no, it's a constant work in progress, and
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I always say that every month it's like a cycle, but it's a cycle that doesn't go just onto itself. It's a cycle that spiral, and every month you strive to be better and better and better and better, and really work on that relationship. It's not going to happen on its own. It's not something that you're going to blink and you're going to have the perfect marriage. All those, older couples that have been married 50 years and up, they put a lot of effort into their marriage. It wasn't easy.
Yeah, I'd say, we talked about the whole idea of Plato and the ideal. The concept that that he had was that the ideal is actually real. Like if you think of a triangle, right? You
Right.
think of a triangle in your head and you come up with a perfect triangle. But if you try to draw it on a wall, it's never perfect. It's not possible to draw.
Right.
So but it's nonetheless real. It exists, as does bravery, courage, love. Those things
Right.
are real things. They're not illusory things.
Right.
But because they're ideals, the ideal moves. And so the way that you feel about it at 20 is different than how you feel about it
Yeah.
at 30, how you feel about it at 40. It also, after 1 year of marriage versus 5 years of marriage, all those things have an effect. And you have to continue to move the ideal upward as opposed to allowing it to slip
Right.
backwards.
Beautiful. Very well said. So in the Jewish life cycle, we have, in the Jewish calendar, we have these 49 days between Passover and the holiday of Shavuot, where we work on our character traits. And we take every week a different attribute, a different characteristic, a different, in Hebrew it's called midah, and we work on it. And every day we strive to be a better person in our lives. And that's a big deal with parenting as well. We can't just come and put a Band-Aid on every little, boo-boo that our kids get. They have to learn to be better people. And so we have to instill in them this idea that they have to work on themselves. And they can't just scream and whine, and they can't come and burst out. They have to learn to control themselves as well. And I feel that is a big part of building who we are. And building ourselves and our families as people to be stronger people and to have stronger values and to have stronger characteristics.
All right, so
Beautiful.
here's the last question that I will ask you. I think back to the Holocaust, and I think about people who were in concentration camps, and there's always the Viktor Frankl who talked about how you with your own mind have the right to determine how you see it. But there were many, many people who left that going, what happened to God? Where were you? Why did you allow this to happen? I'm sure there are people with October the 7th that feel that way. I think there are some people that are starting to feel that way in our country. What do we do to keep and restore that faith when bad things happen? And when sometimes we look around us and we see the challenges of the world, how do we keep that faith?
Excellent question. So, Rabbi Yekutiel Halberstam, he survived the Holocaust, but he lost 11 of his children, his wife and his 11 children. And so he was asked once by his students, how do you do it? How do you continue living here? You're all on your own, and you saw your whole family decimated in the concentration camps. And so he answered is that if God would invite me up to heaven, I would go and I would ask him all these questions, but he hasn't invited me up to heaven yet. I'm still here in this world, and I'm not going to look for answers. I'm just going to try to be the best that I can be here in this world and do the best I can. It's not up to me to ask why. It's up to me to do and to ask the what. What, God, do you want from me right now? and he established a whole dynasty after him, after the Holocaust, that still lives on till today. And another story that also explains this idea is a story with the Lubavitcher Rebbe that last week, that was my article last week, and we commemorated 30 years of his passing, but his legacy lives on. And so there was a story with Rabbi Esther Allouche, who was then the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, and this happened in 1973 after the Yom Kippur War. And so the Rebbe asked him, so what's it like there in Israel? What's the feel like in the streets of Israel? And so kind of Rabbi Allouche kind of gave in and said, that the people are despondent. There were over 3,000 deaths that happened after that war. There were over 9,000 injured, and it's taken a toll on the people. And so the Rebbe, he grabbed his hand and he held it tight, and he told him, no, this is not what God wants of us, to fall into despair. God wants us to rise to the occasion, and he wants us to, all these feelings of despair have to be replaced by actions of hope. And we are a resilient people, and despite all the traverses that we've gone through, now in October 7 and throughout all the generations, this has made us stronger people. And so the question that we need to ask ourselves is not why did this happen, but what? Meaning, what am I going to do about it now? How am I going to be the light into my community, into my family, into my community, into the world, by being strong, resilient, and think, what new projects can you take upon yourself, that go beyond who you are? How can you go and help out at a homeless shelter, or at a community need, or with children that are disabled, or going to visit an old age home, like my son likes to do every Friday. Now he's in New Jersey in a sleepaway camp, and I'm like, on Friday around 4:30, that's the time that he usually goes. I'm like, well, I gotta go to the old age home. I gotta speak to the elderly and bring them some light and smile at them and bring them hope. And really, that's really what has to be, our goal in this age.
The pessimist back in the age of the Stoics believed that that there was no God, and that there was only chaos, and that we had created some type of energy that had somehow or another created the world that we know, but that eventually that energy would die out and we would just slip back to chaos. It is a very hopeless belief, right?
Right.
The other belief is there's an order to the universe. It's by design.
Definitely.
It's not by accident. It happened, right? And that design that exists, that you can see in the cellular system, in human beings, in the Big Bang Theory, whatever you want to apply it to, there was an order. And eventually, we slip back to order if we have faith, if we believe, if we have hope, if we see God. And to me, that is the single most important role he plays. But you can look back at this and you can say, well, you have two choices. You can be the pessimist, which means there is no hope. It just gets worse. From here, if you're upset, you're going to be a lot more upset in the future because it's going to get a lot worse. The other one is, no, there's an order. There is a way. Anyway, Esther, for you and Rabbi Allouche, thank you for all that you do.
And your
it
children.
Is a wonderful thing. And
Thank
your
you.
children,
Israel.
your wonderful
Of course.
children.
Amen. Thank
Many
you.
blessings
Thank you.
for
We
his
should have-
protection.
Yes, for his protection and for all the soldiers, and may all the hostages come home safely. And may we have peace in the world, and may we be able to see the final redemption with the Moshiach.
Can you say a prayer for peace for us? Are you allowed to do prayers?
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
go ahead.
Of course. So I'll just say the prayer that, like, you mean in Hebrew? You want me to say a prayer in Hebrew?
You can tell us what it means after you're done.
So מי שברך אבותינו אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, הוא יברך את חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל, וישמור עליהם, ויחזיר אותם הביתה. And so I pray that God, the God of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, should protect our soldiers fighting in the front lines, and should bring them home safe as well as all the hostages.
Your boy came
Amen.
home this week, right?
Yes, my
Yes.
boy
Last
finally
night.
came home. And wow, what a blessing he made. So happy. I mean, he's not done with his active duty. He still has to go back to the army, but thank God, because he's a lone soldier, he was allowed to take a few weeks off to finally come home and be with his family.
That's wonderful.
What a
Esther, thank you.
blessing.
Yes.
Thank you so much,
Of course,
Esther.
of course.
Thank you for doing this.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. We love you guys.
We
known,
love you.
Yes, I've known you, Emily, for so many years.
I'm going to sign up for your marriage classes.
Yes,
And
there
I'm going
you
to sign
go.
up Paul with
So,
Allouche for his.
So I was going to ask that. Cut.